A zombie croaks that its throat is dry and it gets the urge to drink blood. Immediately it comes face to face with his victim. Our protagonist wakes up and screams his lungs out. As sweat falls from his head, Yusuke Takemura sits upright. The 25-year-old salaryman wonders what the heck had happened and acknowledges that he just had a weird dream. He lifts his hand to see strange bite marks and it triggers his memory. He remembers that he'd stepped outside for the first time in a while and got attacked by an old man. After that, he had collapsed with a fever. To his surprise, it has been 3 days since this happened. Takemura lies back down and scrolls through his phone as he wishes he could play video games forever. His company had gone bust and he lacks the motivation to look for work. As he scrolls through his phone, he comes across news of a zombie outbreak, with the contagion still spreading. The news termed it a world-ending virus. Seeing this jolts Takemura. He jumps off the bed and dashes outside, only to see splatters of blood, Walking Dead, and a wrecked car. Sudden sweat falls upon him as he falls to the ground in shock. After regaining himself, he rings doorbell after doorbell in his apartment building. All the doors are locked, so he wonders if they are out too. He'd thought he could find more information, but everyone locked their doors. All Takemura wants is to find one person. He reaches Kurosa's apartment and tries the door. He's surprised it opens immediately. He screams, asking if anyone is inside as he takes a look around. Just then, he remembers that a certain office lady lives there. Kurosa sees him. He even calls her name, trying to apologize for barging in. But she trudges past him and begins to scratch at a door. Takemura taps her shoulder as he asks what she's doing, but Kurosa continues scratching at the door. He realizes what she is, and to confirm, he grabs hold of her head only for Kurosa not to react. He discovers her temperature is cold and her pulse is non-existent, just like her breathing and heartbeat. To him, she appears to be dead. He shakes it off and resolves to head back. As he opens the door, Takemura gets welcomed by a zombie. He screams and falls on his ass, but the zombie just glimpses at him and continues on his way. Takemura takes this confusion back to his desktop, but all the sites say that zombies attack people. This makes him wonder why they're not attacking him. He concludes that it's the internet and that there's no point worrying about it since it doesn't seem like he's in any danger. Takemura packs a small bag, locks his door, and sets out to first find his bearings. He'd noticed that there was still gas and electricity, so he reckons that not all of Japan has been run over. As he's making his way down the stairs, he hears banging on a door. He takes a peek only to see 3 people trying to get into an apartment. Takemura screams above the noise, asking if they're okay. When he doesn't get a response, he realizes that they're all zombies. He already turned his back to leave when he hears someone in distress inside the same apartment. The 25-year-old screams for confirmation and someone replies from inside. He asks if the person is alright, but she just screams for him to help, that the zombies are blocking her way out. Takemura tells her to wait for a minute as quickly peruses the area for anything he can use. He sees a fire extinguisher and throws it straight at the zombies. It pushes them out of the way, but it's only temporary, so Takemura puts on a helmet and dives in. He notices that they're still not attacking and yells, telling his damsel in distress that he's moving them away. He grabs the first one by the waist as he remembers that the internet had recommended destroying the head. Takemura then throws the zombie over the balcony and it lands head first on the pavement. He repeats this for the other 2 and they all lay dead downstairs. Takemura tells his neighbor that it's alright and that the zombies are gone. The door opens to reveal a mother and her daughter. She apologizes to and thanks Takemura, claiming that they've been inside for so long and had no idea what to do. The mother stutters as she asks if the surroundings are safe, and Takemura fills her with false hope that things are alright now. To him, it should be safe because the zombies are not attacking. She then tells her daughter that they're heading to the evacuation point to see her father. This is the first Takemura is hearing of it. She elaborates that it's the local elementary school and asks if he would like to accompany them. Takemura declines because he doesn't want to get involved. All 3 of them head downstairs and the mother asks again if the zombies are still outside. Takemura says they are, but they're just standing. He tells her to go straight past them and asks if she's ever seen them attacking. She replies in the negative and Takemura urges her to go. It's a different story when they get outside. Immediately the zombies catch sight of them. They begin to chase. Takemura yells for them to run as he does the same up the stairs. The zombies are hot on his tail, contrary to his conclusion that they're slow creatures. They knock Takemura down and run past him to devour the mother and child as he helplessly watches. They scream and keep screaming until the zombies are done with them. Takemura is in shock and walks silently into the bloodied scene. He realizes that the zombies do attack, but in a world full of zombies, he's the only one they won't attack. He goes back to Kuro's apartment and examines the bite marks on his hand, blaming them for his current condition. Kuro lays tied up and gagged beside him. He'd looked into her during his zombie research and discovered that she's Kuro's Takiko, a 23-year-old new office worker. It seems to Takemura that no one had checked on her. He remembers her to be pretty gloomy, and it explains why he'd forgotten about her. He peels off her top and gets wide-eyed as he reveals her melons. Takemura buries his face in them, acknowledging how calming they are. He then peruses her body for bite marks but doesn't find any. This makes him reckon that she was one of the first to be infected. He notices that she smells nice and begins to feel hot. Takemura gives in, wondering if he'll get infected if he makes love to her. He grabs her melons as he does his thing, but flashes of the mother and daughter keep flooding his mind. Takemura wonders what he could have done to save them and regrets them asking for his help. As he finishes, he repeats that there was nothing he could do and that they should go die by themselves. Kuro's just stares up at him with lifeless eyes while he's trembling. Next stop is the evacuation center, and Takemura gets there on his bike. He sees its condition and declares that it's done for. He makes his way up the bloodied school hallway until he reaches a vending machine. He almost pays but realizes that there's no point. Just then, he notices and saw a sign outside the window of the opposite building and reckons that there must be survivors. The first and second floor are swarming with only zombies, but the doors to the third floor are locked, so Takemura resolves to go through the back. After doing this, he discovers an elevator and uses it to reach the third floor. As its doors open on the third floor, Takemura notices a poorly made barricade that obviously wouldn't help matters. A kid comes into view, but before Takemura can talk to him, he disappears. He chases after this kid until he takes Takemura to see his sister and brother. The sister screams and Takemura is left apologizing for disturbing them and explains that he's not dangerous. He then asks them if they're hungry. Takemura had fed all three of them, and both boys rushed their meals so fast that he had to ask how long it had been since they ate. Their sister admits that she's been sleeping for a long time, so she doesn't know. She then drops her meal to clean the mouth of their youngest. Takemura lodges his hand on his chin as he reckons that the sister is pretty hungry too. He asks if she's had enough, offering to give her some more, but she says she's alright and thanks him for the meal. Takemura moves on to his reason for coming as he asks if she's the one that hung up the sauce sign. She says no and breaks into a story about 8 people posting up there originally. Unfortunately, they ran out of food and anxiety levels rose, so they all left to scout one by one, but none of them ever came back. She couldn't leave because she has her brothers. Takemura acknowledges that it must have been tough and realizes that she's been waiting for him to give his name. He then introduces himself and she does the same, saying she's Fujino Mitsuki and her brothers are Takashi and Masaru respectively. Takemura observes that she's keeping her good manners even in this crisis, and concludes that they must have been raised well. She inquires if he's part of a rescue team, but Takemura says he's just a passerby. She wants to know if it's safer outside, and Takemura hesitates before replying that it's not safe for them, that zombies are still outside. She asks to go with him, but he immediately turns her down, making up a story about it not being safe to move in groups lest the zombies mob them. Mitsuki insists that he just take her 2 brothers somewhere safe, and Takemura says there's no such place. Disappointed, she stares at the ground. Her brothers too just sit there silently staring at her. A monologue breaks out in Takemura's head. He observes how well-mannered and docile Midaki is, showing signs of a shut-in trying to escape reality. He scratches his head and promises to bring some food back since there's plenty to last a while. He also promises to send any rescue team he sees their way. Mitsuki thanks him and apologizes for being selfish. Takemura says it's fine and encourages them to hang in there, that he's sure help will come. Present day, and he imagines Kuro's to be Mitsuki as he's making love to her. He thinks it would have been easier to get her were she a zombie. He wipes Kuro's clean and moves on to the supermarket by the stations. Takemura has to secure it as a lifeline by first of all clearing out all the rotting food. As he steps foot into it, he holds his nose shut, noticing that the fish and meat are a goner. Same with the leafy vegetables, bread, milk and milk products, but he resolves to leave those for the meantime. He packs them all into trash bags and wonders what he'll do with them, wishing the zombies ate stuff like this. An idea comes to toss the rotting food with some living people, and if they're hungry enough they'll eat it. He debunks it and wonders whether to dump it in the mountains. He debunks that too, wondering if he should just put the trash at a local dump site. Unfortunately, the smell would be a problem that way, so he resolves to find a truck. Just then, Takemura notices that some zombies are standing by the train station but can't believe that they're waiting for the train even in that state. Most of the zombies he'd seen so far have been mindless wanderers. He concludes that they must be acting out their lives before they got turned. Takemura quits thinking about it and decides to look into it later since he literally has nothing to do. Afterwards, he locates an unlocked minivan and with it, he cleans out the supermarket for the next few days. There was too much trash for the minivan to handle, so Takemura finds himself a truck. As he drives it, he proclaims that he does not recognize any of the switches in it, but it could be so useful that he could even sleep in it. He drives by an outdoor activities center and makes a mental note that it would be a good place to move to when electricity and gas run out. He would have preferred the town, but water sources would prove an issue. He dumps the trash on the outskirts of town and heaves a sigh of relief. Next on his list is to pick up something to eat, with the plan to use his apartment's food storage. This jolts his memory and he quickly mobilizes some food and delivers it to Mitsuki and her brothers, apologizing for taking so long. Masaru thanks him for the curry, but Mitsuki's expression is still down. Takemura then gives her brothers some toys and pulls her outside for a chat. She thanks him for all he's done and begins stuttering as she wants to make a demand concerning her brothers. Takemura knows what she wants to say. He'd deduced that she wants him to bring healthier food, but he only came by for some information. He'd fed them, but continuing won't get him anything. He'd done it from his own goodwill and asked himself if he would do that for every survivor he finds. This makes him conclude that he doesn't want to help them anymore. He turns to leave, lying to Mitsuki that he'll think about what she asks. The girl begins to panic, screaming that she's sorry and that he's been a great help to them. Takemura says he understands that it's tough going hungry and advises her to use the fabric in the supermarket as he hopes they'll get some help before winter. She grabs his hand and begs him to save them as tears roll down her cheeks. Takemura acknowledges that no man could say no to her expression, only for him to take his hand from her, wondering if she knows she's letting a stranger gamble with her life. He asks Mitsuki if she has ever seen a person get attacked by zombies and she falls quiet. He then quips that it's a risk even finding something to eat. Mitsuki apologizes, all to Takemura's disdain. He declares that if she wants help he'll provide it, but in exchange, she'll let him have her. Mitsuki is shocked by his offer. Shock turns into anger as she screams that all men are the same. Takemura calmly asks what else she has to offer and Mitsuki is stumped. She then replies that she'll look after the supermarket when Takemura isn't around, but he tells her that he doesn't care. He asks where she thinks he sleeps and makes it clear that he could push all of them to be attacked by zombies. The realization reverts Fujino to begging as she claims that people should help each other the most at times like this. Takemura screams that he doesn't care and it hasn't been helping each other but him helping her. Apparently, thanking him has been enough and Mitsuki has been assuming that people will just give her whatever she needs. Takemura tells her that if she needs his help then it's going to cost her. Mitsuki breaks into sweat instantly. She gives in, agreeing to use her hands. They take things to the restroom where she unzips his pants amidst sobs. She asks what to do and Takemura says to stroke him. He goes as far as giving her an example. He later tells her to spit on him and when she says she can't, he asks if she wants to use her mouth instead. This is enough motivation for her. He asks her to stand up and freeze her melons from their linen prison, saying if she wants everything to be over faster, she should put some effort into it. Takemura heads back home and for the next week, he does everything possible to help him survive in this world full of zombies. He'd gathered some weaponry from the ones left at the police station. There weren't any survivors there either, just more zombies. He opens up a map, marking out an unmanned hotel on it. He discovers that the town is really big and wonders if he should scout the town for easier travel. He debunks the idea as he refers to his desktop and maps out a route. He'd observed the behavior of the zombies and realized that they returned to the same location on purpose. They'd leave their houses in the morning, wander around during the day and finally return home at night. Takemura feels pity for them and then thinks to drop by the supermarket as he keeps thinking what Mitsuki and her brothers could be used for. Until then, he decides that she'll be paying with her body. As they go at it, Takemura says she's gotten more cooperative and she likens the act to changing diapers. This annoys Takemura as he wonders how high her pride is. He then takes off her shorts but nothing more really happens. He returns to where the kids are, almost running into Takashi as he's playing. He tells him to carry on but the boy stares at him. Takemura asks him whether there's still enough food and the boy says yes, but it's important for them to ration it. He confirms that Mitsuki was the one who said that and takes a seat, saying it's a good idea. Just then, Mitsuki enters. She looks over at Takemura and then back at her brother. She asks where Masaru is and the boy answers from a distance. She grabs both their hands, telling them to go with her. Takemura too says he'll be heading out, but by the time he reaches the first floor back entrance, he remembers that he forgot his bag. He hates that he has to go back, and when he reaches the 3rd floor, Mitsuki has his bag and both her brothers with her inside the elevator. Takemura yells, asking what she's doing, trying to tell them that it's dangerous. Mitsuki just screams that they're heading back home. The day it all began had been so calm. Mitsuki was drying off Masaru's hair as they watched the newscaster say that there had been a large breakout of violence in the capital. Her father had his eyes peeled too. Masaru had asked what violence meant, and she just explained that it was a big fight. As the newscaster bellows that all indigenes near the OOO station are advised to stay indoors, Mitsuki's father yells that the station's just down the road. The public address system blared as it announced a state of emergency and a call for disaster prevention. It advised them to evacuate. Mitsuki was wary. She'd asked her father if it wouldn't be easier to just walk down to the evacuation center, but he claimed the situation to be unusual and said it would be better if they hurried. A boy called Atsushi stopped Fujino as they discussed the evacuation. Atsushi's father wanted them to evacuate just in case. Someone new greeted him and Atsushi returned the gesture. They complained about something worrisome going on, and Mitsuki's father informed her that Takasaki's family would be evacuating too. He then suggested that they all go together. Atsushi and Mitsuki promised to see each other later. They all drove in a convoy until they reached a standstill. Mitsuki got worried that nobody was moving, and they concluded that walking was the only available choice. Mitsuki had seen Takasaki's car but didn't see Atsushi in it. Her father just concluded that they too had abandoned their vehicle. They heard screams in the distance up until Takasaki's vehicle ran over a man. Mitsuki's father pulled her along in a bid to help the victim, but when they got there, people were already trying to eat other people. Her father was confused at first, but when they tried to attack Mitsuki, he threw himself at the zombies and told her to run. She took both her brothers and fled to the nearby local supermarket. There, they doubled down with other strangers, but she kept wondering whether her father was all right. She heard a man screaming at people outside the supermarket and rushed to meet him. He yelled at them to calm down and say so if they wanted to enter. Mitsuki warned him not to let anyone in because no one seemed normal outside. The officer declared that it had been so the entire night. He then asked if her brothers were awake, offering them some food. Mitsuki thanked him and said they would stay until everything blew over. The officer encouraged her that it wouldn't take long for the police to sort everything out, but 3 days passed, and the police never came. All the programs on television talked about a disease that pushes people to attack others when infected. The officer came by and told them that he would be going out to search for help and that he'd already hung up and saw sign. Mitsuki chased after him, asking if it wasn't dangerous, but the officer said he couldn't contact his family and was worried about them. Unfortunately, he never came back. The shows on television became static, Mitsuki's phone battery died and she had no charger, and then the food ran out. She'd been scared seeing one of the men staring blandly at the wall. She concluded that it was dangerous to stay and that they would get the others to take them along whenever they left. The next day came and she asked after the others only to get told that they'd left that morning via the elevator. Mitsuki began to wonder if they saw them as a burden and didn't want to get slowed down. She wondered most of all why it was just one weird guy that had stayed behind. She was scared and kept telling herself that she wanted to go home. The door handle rattled that night and she asked him what he wanted, but the man said he had some food that he wished to share with them. Immediately Mitsuki yelled that they'd get the food in the morning. The rattling increased and then turned into banging. Scared, she grabbed both her brothers, incessantly apologizing to them. By the next day, even the man had left, leaving Mitsuki and her brothers behind. A few days after that, Takemura arrived and made her a very cold offer. Every time she did lewd things with him, she wondered if it was really dangerous outside and how he came and went so easily. She wondered how he brought back so much food, and since he came and went, their parents must be waiting for them on the outside. Present day, and Takemura yells asking where Mitsuki thinks she's going. She screams in return that she's heading home. Upon opening the entrance doors, she tells both her brothers that it's going to be alright, but contrary to that, the zombies catch a whiff of them and attack. One grabs hold of Fujino, but a flying kick from Takemura saves her life. Masaru then hurriedly pulls her back into the elevator using her sweater. Takemura holds back the zombies, yelling for her to get the kids inside. He continues screaming for Mitsuki to close the door and go. Takashi hits the elevator button, shutting the door. They all hug each other as Mitsuki tells them that they can't go home. Tears begin to roll down their cheeks as they realize that their father and everyone else is dead. Mitsuki especially blames herself for her father's death. As the elevator door closes, Takemura is left to battle the zombies. Two of them whip him against the ground hard enough to make a thud. He laments in pain as they leave him and head back to the elevator door. Takemura gets annoyed all over again as he remembers Mitsuki yelling that they're going home. Nonetheless, he has to do something about the zombies by the elevator. He gets some rope from utilities, ties the zombies to his bike and drags them outside. Afterwards, he ensures that all the entrances are properly locked. This way the zombies will attack anyone who tries to get in, but inside the building will be safe to wander around. Mitsuki is still sobbing as her brothers hover around her. They hear a clattering noise and both look back, wide-eyed as Takemura says hey. This prompts Mitsuki to raise her head, but she's welcomed by Takemura angrily asking her what the hell. She asks how he survived. Takemura almost bursts into a myriad of swear words but holds himself because of the children. He reckons that they've not eaten yet and hands them an excess of food, telling them to go crazy while he has an important talk with their sister. When they get to privacy, he asks her why she did it, but Mitsuki stays silent. He wants her to say something because she could have gotten all of them killed. With her head bowed, she quips that she'd thought it was safe and so wanted to go back to their parents. Takemura scolds her, asking if she'd tried reaching them on the phone, or at least scoping things out first. Mitsuki then yells that there's nothing like zombies. As she's about to repeat it, Takemura pulls her by the wrist, telling her to come with him. He shows her the city from the supermarket's rooftop and she sees abandoned cars, bloodied streets and multiple walking dead. He quips that the lights she's seeing doesn't mean there are any survivors in the buildings. Mitsuki stays silent for quite some time and finally says that they're all gone. She asks if Takemura thinks her parents are alright and he says he doesn't know. The three of them happen to be the only survivors he's found. Mitsuki would like to know how Takemura is so calm when the town has been massacred. She wonders aloud how he survived the attacks just now when she thought he was dead. Takemura just chuckles. He hadn't thought up an excuse, so he just raises a gun and blames it for his survival. He claims he'd taken it off a dead police officer and used it to take care of the zombies. There's still doubt on Mitsuki's face, so he goes on about zombies reacting to emotions too. He claims that they react to the fear she feels around them and that's why they attack her. He then declares that if she keeps calm and cuts herself free from emotions, she'll be safe. She stares at his gun and asks why he didn't use it to threaten her into doing what he wanted. This annoys Takemura. He tells her not to get a big head, that he might find her attractive but was just pissed that she wanted him to feed her for nothing. Mitsuki falls silent again, accepting his answer in soberness. Takemura makes her understand that not all of Japan has crumbled, but he's going to put her to work until the rescue teams arrive because she owes him big time. He's about to get to it when Mitsuki asks to stay on the roof a little longer. When asked why, she quips that she'd like her brothers to be asleep before they do anything. She then says there's a security room with a lockable door and Takemura agrees to her terms. Come nightfall, Takemura makes his way to the security lounge and decides to use it as his new hideout from now on. Since Mitsuki is now more cooperative, he doesn't have to fear her stabbing him in the night. All that's left is to figure out how to get through the winter, and if things get bad, he can take them to the outdoor activities center. He hears a knock on the door followed by Mitsuki stuttering as she tells him that she's heading to the changing room. Takemura just says he'll be right there. Upon getting there, he meets Mitsuki on her knees. The first thing she does is beg Takemura that she doesn't want to get pregnant. He asks if she's ever done something like this or even had a boyfriend and she nods saying no. Since there's no protection, Takemura just promises not to get her pregnant. He realizes that he can't trust her to handle things and takes charge, telling her to lie down. He then grabs her melons only to discover she had no undergarments on. Mitsuki claims that she took them off to save cleaning. He continues touching her and later asks her to take off her shorts. Mitsuki obliges, asking Takemura to go slow. They get at it and he feels like he's the only one taking care of her, so he asks Mitsuki to go on top. As soon as she climbs him, he tells Fujino to pretend like she's riding a horse. It's still difficult to get going, so Takemura asks if she has gotten herself off before. When she says she hasn't, he just flips her over. Mitsuki says it hurts and that they should try again some other time, but an impatient Takemura finds a way and sends Mitsuki screaming till they're done. The next morning, he's shocked when he hears his name. Mitsuki had come by to ask if she should get some breakfast for him too, and Takemura says he can eat. Unfortunately, it's all canned food, so he makes a mental note to get some cooking gear. Mitsuki coughs and he immediately quips that she shouldn't give it to him. She claims it's leftover from their activities of the day before, and Takemura reiterates that she shouldn't infect him. He gathers the three of them and breaks into a small speech, telling them that he saved all their lives so they have to listen to him for a while. They all concur. Takemura has a plan for them all to search the floor and lower the shutters on the underground entrance, but he needs the key to do that. He also wants them to gather any maps or useful memos they can find. Kakashi asks if it's just the three of them and Takemura agrees, saying he has something to do but will be back by the evening. He finally finds the zombies. Before he left, Mitsuki had called him their meal ticket and asked him not to die. He acknowledged how mouthy she'd gotten. Takemura's plan for the day is to move the zombies out of the second floor, which happens to house the everyday goods, the drugstore, the ladies' clothing, and the discount store. If he can make it safe for the others, it would mean less work for him. It dawns on him that they may find it suspicious if he clears out so many zombies. He'd gotten rid of 3 in front of them, so maybe they won't, but then they'd wonder why he didn't clear the first floor. Takemura needs the first floor to remain contaminated because if they can gather their own food, then he'd lose his hold over them and Mitsuki could turn against him again. He decides to only loosen his grip on them when they need him for more than food. Takemura then resolves to lie that the zombies were few while he closes up the emergency shutters and sorts out the escalators. He also wants to drop by the electronic shop and the library too, so he quickly finishes up. Later in the day, a coughing Mitsuki bumps into Takemura in the hallway and he gives her a rice cooker, saying he really wants rice and had put some bags in the hallway. She says it'll be difficult to eat it without utensils, and he quips that he cleared up the second floor so she can grab some utensils from there. Mitsuki is skeptical about going, shaking as she escorts Takemura, but when she sees all the utilities, she loses every ounce of fear and begins to peruse the goods. She holds up a pillow, quipping that there are many blankets, and then asks where Takemura is sleeping. He tells her it's the changing room and that they can continue sleeping in theirs since it's the furthest from the entrance. She wonders aloud if he doesn't mind her sharing a room with the boys, and he says she can just come over when they want to make love. Mitsuki blushes too much and tells him that she won't fight him on it as long as he keeps it from her brothers. Takemura agrees. She sees some curtains and suggests that they use it to separate the rooms, but Takemura thinks she shouldn't take things that seriously. Since they're living in an office, Mitsuki had thought curtains would make it feel more homely, but Takemura reminds her that they can't live there forever. He also quips that the electricity and water will eventually run out and they'll need to move when that happens. She asks where to, and Takemura reiterates his activities center plan. Mitsuki finds it strange that he's able to plan so calmly for the future when all she could focus on is how soon help would come. Takemura says she doesn't need to think about anything useful and should just follow his orders. If she stays useful, she gets fed and there's no point in worrying about it. She quietly accepts her fate until she remembers something. Mitsuki dips her hand in her pocket and presents the key to the underground shutters to Takemura. She'd found other keys with tags and placed them in his office drawer. With a smile on his face, Takemura admits that he didn't expect them to find the key. Later on, he finds Mitsuki, head down and heaving on the table. He's instantly alert, and as her brothers ask what the problem is, she quips that her head hurts. Takemura checks her temperature and it reads 38.2 degrees. They lie her down and cover her up, but it only seems to get worse. Kakashi asks if she'll be alright, and Takemura assures him that it's a little cold and that Mitsuki just needs to sleep. He realizes that it could be the virus. He was bitten and could be a carrier even if he has no symptoms. He wonders if she could be turning because they had relations and admits to himself that he messed up. Takemura takes care of the boys, washing and preparing the rice himself. Hours later, Mitsuki wakes up with a cold rag on her forehead. She sits up and her first thought is the whereabouts of her brothers. She notices the food and water already set out for her. With the tray in hand, she locates her brothers sleeping as they hold hands and draws the blanket up to their necks. Apparently, they're sleeping somewhere else so they won't catch what she has. She sees a children's book and reckons that Takemura must have brought them. She thinks to herself that he's cold to her but is kind to the kids. She continues with her tray and finds Takemura fast asleep. She reckons he must have done a lot for them while she was passed out and wonders why that makes her happy. Mitsuki sees him as someone who has been alone for a long time. She had her brothers, but he had to face the world alone. She concludes that that must have been why he saved them and looks after them to this day. She sneezes at that moment and Takemura wakes up. Fujino bids him good morning, but he seems relieved that all she had was a cold. She apologizes for worrying him, but Takemura says he wasn't worried and proceeds to ask how she feels. She quips that she feels a little strange, but she's much better and wants to make some food. Takemura makes her wear a face mask so as not to sneeze into their meal, and Mitsuki shoots him a heartwarming smile. Mitsuki hangs their linens to dry as she proclaims that the weather may be cold but it's also lovely. The only problem is that Takemura had said he'd be back in 3 days, but it's now the 4th. She can't help but wonder whether something has happened to him. Mitsuki quickly shakes off the thought, reminding herself that Takemura can take care of himself and all she has to do is her job. Before he left, Takemura had given the 3 siblings some duties. The first is smoking, a storage method that uses smoke to flavor and preserve food. It's usually done in a stainless steel smoker, but a cardboard box will suffice if one is careful about the open flame. All that's left for Mitsuki to make bacon is for her to get a hang of temperature control. The second duty is hydroponics, an attempt to grow their own source of food before they move out to the mountains. It's the job of her brothers to keep record of how the plants grow in relation to temperature and amount of sunlight. Mitsuki sees how happy they are and can't remember the last time she's seen them smile like that. She blames her despair for affecting them and then herself for not realizing what she was doing to them. She joins them, promising herself that she won't fall back into the darkness and will try her best to stay smiling. She drops by the second floor to get some things that they'll need and notices how late it is. She just concludes that Takemura will come back the next day. Mitsuki gets distracted and tries on a school uniform. She's still feeling nostalgic when Takemura interrupts her, apologizing for coming back so late. She welcomes him back and asks if he was alright. He just says he got what he was looking for. Mitsuki doesn't like his facial expression and inquires what the problem is. Apparently, there are now fewer zombies roaming outside. They didn't disappear, they're just holed up inside various buildings. Takemura thinks it'll make it easier to move out, and if a few more disappear, then Mitsuki and her brothers can move around. He suggests that they stay put for as long as they have power, and then asks her how things are going. She puts forth a notebook, telling him that they finished everything he asked for and even made notes for growing their own food. As Takemura flips through, she explains that although they may not be able to build a hothouse, they could dig trenches and cover them with something to get a similar effect. She quips that if they cultivate plants resistant to frost, they could keep harvesting through the winter too. This surprises Takemura and pushes him to ask if Mitsuki is actually smart. She says maybe, and he inquires about her grades only to discover that she was top 5 in her entire school. Takemura, on the other hand, never made it into the top half. Mitsuki apologizes for this and he wonders why. He then quips that he can leave all the work that requires brain work to her since she's smart. This makes Mitsuki blush. He catches her off guard when he asks about her outfit. She explains that she'd finished everything and thought to try a change of pace. She apologizes, but Takemura tells her that there's nothing bad with it. He then urges her to make love with the school outfit on. He instructs her to place her hands on the wall and Mitsuki obliges without question. He lifts her skirt and gets down to business. He grabs her melons and even feeds her his finger as they go about it. Mitsuki catches a glimpse of herself in the mirror and admits that she looks shameless. She proclaims that she's scared and Takemura flips her over and continues until she grabs hold of his person, smiling from all the bliss. He's on the first floor taking inventory of all the things he has gathered over the past few weeks. He closes the door to the truck after confirming that he'd brought down Mitsuki's smoked meat, some water, tools, and even some fuel. Just then, he hears a rattle and pulls out his 6-shooter with immediacy. He checks behind the door, but it's only a zombie. Something else stinks and it isn't a zombie, but before he can check it out, his walkie-talkie crackles to life. Mitsuki informs him that they received a message from a lady asking for help and asks if they should answer her. He says to wait for him and heads upstairs at that moment. The lady keeps asking for somebody to help her. Takemura wonders why it is so after such a long time of only being static and urges Mitsuki to answer her. She's hesitant, but he tells her that the lady would feel much better if she hears from another woman and instructs her to ask for the lady's location while withholding their own. Immediately, Mitsuki talks into the receiver. The lady screams from the other end, yelling to know where Mitsuki is. She urges her to calm down, that they can't talk at the same time and she should let go of the talk button when she's done talking. It's Mitsuki's turn to ask for the lady's location, but she doesn't know where she is. She implores Mitsuki for where to go. In turn, Mitsuki asks if she's holed up with anyone and the lady claps back. She wants to know why Mitsuki would ask her that. All she wants is to come to where Mitsuki is. She lets go of the talk button and Takemura says it's enough. He could hear footsteps in the background and had also noticed something weird in the connection. He concludes that she must be a decoy. Mitsuki, on the other hand, is disturbed by the lady's manner of speech, and Takemura informs her that the lady is being threatened and that they gain nothing by saving her. He then declares that he won't be responsible for whatever happens should she disclose their location. Later that night, everywhere gets cold all of a sudden. Mitsuki calls on Takemura and he quips that the heating has stopped and he'll check it out. When they get outside, they realize that the power everywhere has run out. Mitsuki then yells, pointing eagerly at a fire in the distance. Once Takemura sees how huge the fire is, he tells Mitsuki to get ready to leave. She asks what he'll be doing and he answers that he's going to check it out. He declares that if it's dangerous they'll leave that instant and mandates Mitsuki to wake the boys. Takemura arrives at the site of the burning on his bike, takes off his helmet and realizes that the fire is right on the shortest path to the mountains. He hopes it won't complicate things. A car keeps drawing closer to him and just as it's about to hit him, a man jumps out of it. Takemura's jaw drops when he realizes that the man is a zombie. The zombie then pulls out a lady from the passenger's seat as she cries for help. More zombies emanate from the shadows, but before they can reach the lady, the zombie cuts her head clean off with a small machete. He then picks it up, stares into its dead eyes and tosses the head in the distance. Takemura still can't fathom how this zombie behaves so much like a human. He acknowledges that it would be too dangerous to investigate but is also too dangerous to let go. He straps on his helmet and zooms off after it. It stares at him and Takemura confirms that it's a zombie. It had a police officer's uniform on. It's now clear that he's no normal zombie, and although it didn't come after Takemura, there's no assurance that he won't come after the other three. Takemura decides to track it down and look for a chance to take it out with his gun. Unfortunately, he loses track of it and blames the fact that he'd come too far inside. He hears a sound in the distance and comes across double doors with knocking and clattering emanating from them. He gets wide-eyed as two female zombies in tattered clothes appear. A few ways from there, the zombie Takemura was chasing drags out another man and throws him into the flames beneath. The man barely holds onto a platform as he cries that he doesn't want to die. The zombie is adamant and cuts off this man's hands, thus sending him to his death. Takemura sees this and rushes into the building at once, trying to reach this zombie. He happens upon a room where his senses tell him that too much is going on in. Upon looking around, he sees a video camera and feeds it one of the tapes nearby. In it, he sees a group of people egging on a tied-up man on a plank. Unfortunately, he falls off before he even reaches the edge. Down below, zombies make a meal out of him. The same thing is done to another lady, and Takemura notices that the third victim is the policeman zombie that he's chasing. He watches him get bitten and turn but is surprised when the zombie says to pull them up and another says he's on it. This helps Takemura realize how bad things are. The zombies had originally roamed about like animals, but the more humans they ate, the more human their movements became. As he watches the tape, he notices how the eyes of the zombies shine with intelligence further down, like they're waiting for a chance to attack. Takemura remembers that he'd seen some zombies that seemed to be following the same patterns they did as humans. It then dawns on him that the more they eat, the more intelligent they become. Yusuke throws away the video camera as he realizes that these intelligent zombies were only increasing enemy forces. He'd seen at least 10 zombies on the ground floor of the supermarket, and imagined the horror that would ensue should they regain their intelligence. He makes a mental note that they'll have to take a detour to the mountains and seeks to leave the building, seeing as it's too dangerous. As he swings open the double doors, a zombie stands in wait with a shovel in its hand. They stare each other down, only for the zombie to turn and go on her way. He stares outside the window and sees a pile of corpses. This prompts him to hurry back to the supermarket. It's already daybreak by the time Takemura pulls up at the supermarket. His phone reads 5:57 a.m. He hurries to the garage, thinking to himself that they need to get out before the zombies get free. The same smell he'd left before still lingers in the air. He realizes it's coming from the trash area and wonders if he left it open. As he draws closer, it begins to smell more like piss than trash. It's one realization after the other for Takemura. He rushes to his talkie-walkie and tries to reach Mitsuki as he remembered that everyone other than the three of them upstairs had left, but he never confirmed if they had died. As he races back up, he notices scattered water bottles. A human was hiding amidst the trash this whole time, but only while the power lasted. No one would have been able to bear it once all the lights went out. He tells Mitsuki that he thinks a survivor is heading her way, and tells her not to provoke them before he gets there. Fujina wakes both her brothers up as she packs a bag. To her, they're taking a trip, and although she's worried about leaving, having Takemura on her side makes her feel like it'll be fine. As they reach the second floor, Mitsuki asks who she thinks is Takemura if the fire wasn't a problem. She's stumped to see a haggard-looking man in a tracksuit wielding a hammer. She declares that they have plenty of food and drops a bag of canned goods for him. As the stranger reaches for the bag, Mitsuki and her brothers make a run for it. She yells for her siblings to get inside the office as she remembers the stranger to be the last man from their original group. She's left wondering how he survived. Mitsuki knows he cannot be reasoned with and finds a way to barricade the door. She freezes up, continually asking herself what she can do, continually telling herself that she cannot protect her siblings in this state. She braces up as the stranger steps into the room and stretches a dagger at him, yelling for him not to come any closer. Mitsuki says he can have all their supplies and the whole building to himself, that they're not a threat to him and are even going to leave. All this while, she's reassuring herself internally. The strange man coughs, readying his hammer as he confirms that her brothers are the only other people there. She yells for him not to step inside, but he does anyway. As he attacks her with his hammer, she does the same with her dagger. The culprit gets his arm slashed and she gets sent falling to the ground. He grabs hold of his bleeding hand with a maniacal look in his eyes. Mitsuki yells at her brothers to close the door and not come out, knowing full well that he'll go for the weakest. She resolves not to let him and steadies her dagger. As he approaches, the walkie-talkie crackles to life with bits of Takemura's voice escaping the small machine. She sheds a tear as Takemura coming back gives her a shred of hope. Fujino tries fleeing to join her brothers, but he throws the hammer straight at her leg and kicks her while she's down. Having caught up with her, he pulls her hair and slams her on the ground before punching out her face. Her brothers can't stand by. They both charge towards this man only to get beaten down as well. Just then, Takemura lets a gunshot fly for awareness and kicks the daylight out of this man's face, making his nose bleed on the spot. Takemura throws him a pair of handcuffs and tells him to cuff one to his leg and the other to a desk. He fires another shot close to the stranger's head and reiterates his instructions. This time, the man obeys. Yusuke inquires if Mitsuki is hurt. She doesn't give an answer and just says that Masaru is. This annoys Takemura, but he's even more pissed when he notices how hurt Takashi is. The youngster's leg is twisted and bleeding. He's holding his stomach, which makes Takemura think that some of his organs may have taken damage too. He can't help but regret that there isn't a hospital nearby or at least a doctor. Mitsuki angrily picks up Takemura's gun. He tries telling her that it's dangerous, but she undoes the safety and points it at this stranger. He screams, begging her not to hurt him, and Mitsuki yells back, asking him how he could say such a thing. He continues to apologize and beg, and Mitsuki says he doesn't have the right after what he did to Masaru. He screams that he didn't mean to kill Masaru, but he's been trapped for so long that he's become strange. Mitsuki yells time after time that she doesn't care, but this man keeps apologizing and begging for his life. She's disgusted that he's begging to be saved, and Takemura calmly collects the gun from her. She begins to tell him how her brothers had thought of him as a hero and wanted to be like him after he saved them. She even attributes it to why they jumped to her rescue when they thought she was in trouble. Mitsuki then turns to face him amidst tears, asking him why he didn't protect her brothers. All Takemura can do is apologize. She gets a hold of herself, realizing that she may have said some horrible things. Mitsuki then apologizes to Takemura, but all he wants is for her to check on Takashi's wounds. He blames himself. He had a spare gun but didn't leave it with Mitsuki, all because he didn't trust her enough. And now they have to go, but Takashi needs treatment. Takemura is distracted by the sound of the disaster prevention siren. The ongoing announcement states that all survivors should make their way to OOO City Hall, and that they have 100 survivors who they'll transport by helicopter in 3 days' time. Takemura instructs Mitsuki to wrap Takashi in a blanket and offers to carry Masaru as they leave. The stranger wants to come too, and to Mitsuki's surprise, Takemura unlocks him. He tells her that he just wants to check things before they leave and instructs the stranger to look outside the window. Yusuke asks if he sees any zombies, and the stranger replies in the negative before he turns to face Yusuke. He already has his gun raised. He screams, asking this bastard if he thought he wasn't pissed. He then empties his 6-shooter into him. The force sends him bursting through the window and into the mercy of roaming zombies. As they look down on his corpse, Takemura says they'll be taking the underground exit while the zombies are busy with him. As Takemura speeds on in his truck, Mitsuki holds a wrapped-up Takashi in her arms, and Masaru's body stays covered up at the back. The town is quiet as zombies started holing up inside houses because of the winter. Takemura catches a glimpse of City Hall. Apparently, north of the town houses only banks and hotels, and the big road they're on leads to the town hall. Behind it lies a really open park that allows for a clear line of sight, and zombies avoid it because it has open water, and they can't swim. They pull up by the mesh fence where they meet 2 men. Takemura asks if they're with the town hall, and they reply in the positive, stating how happy they are that he's alive. They tell him that the rescue team will be by in 3 days, and Takemura asks if the 3 of them can come in. He's then instructed to park underground while one of the men directs him. Takemura doesn't feel anything strange about these people. It didn't look like they connived at the beginning, and it makes him wonder if they make decisions on entrance individually. In all this, they didn't appear to be a disordered crowd. As he finishes parking underground, the men ask Takemura to head over all his weapons, explaining that they don't allow weapons within the wall. He doesn't argue and hands them his revolver, quipping that he can't smuggle it in any way. Mitsuki calls their attention, asking if they have anyone that can take a look at Takashi. One of the men immediately leads them to the doctor's office. He knocks, telling Makura that they have a patient for her. She makes them hold on for a moment before opening the door for them to come in. Makura confirms that Takashi was hit with a hammer and asks if he's had any trouble breathing. Mitsuki replies in the negative and grabs hold of her brother's hand. The doctor instructs her to reach out should Takashi's urine become bloody. Since they had no x-ray, she put a temporary splint on his leg, instructing Mitsuki to cool it and ensure that Takashi doesn't move it. She asks the doctor if her brother is going to be okay, and Makura assures her that he's not presenting any worrying symptoms, so she'll give him some painkillers and let him rest. Her last instruction is for Mitsuki to inform her immediately anything changes. She then thanks the doctor. The man who'd led them there asks Makura if he can continue with evacuation procedures. Takemura observes the evacuation cards, noticing that they're designed for households. All the people who've stuck together from the onset are treated as a household, and supplies are handed out to a representative from each group. He tells Takemura that he'll show them to their room when he's done filling in the card. They explain the rules to them and show them to a room they can sleep in. On the way, Takemura and Mitsuki notice other survivors laughing and talking amongst themselves. He thinks to himself that they don't look hunted and blames it on the end being so close. Their room ended up on the west coast of the building's second floor. Here, the atmosphere is much more gloomy, and Takemura reckons it must be the most recent survivors. Their guide hands over a box of supplies for Takashi, and they thank him for everything. The man's just happy that Takashi is alright. He tells them to let someone know if they need anything because they hand out supplies every morning. He asks if they need anything else, and Takemura pulls him aside, informing him about Masaru's body in the truck. He asks if he'll be able to dig a grave for the boy, but the man is more interested in whether Takashi was bitten. Takemura sadly admits that he was killed by a human, and the guide apologizes. Takemura takes another look at Takashi and is grateful the town hall had a doctor. Mitsuki concurs. He tells her to sleep while he watches over Takashi because she's tired too. Mitsuki rests her head on his laps, and Takemura covers her with a blanket as she sleeps. He, on the other hand, keeps thinking. With just 3 days to evacuate, he wonders how many people survived the zombies, how many places are safe, and what exactly he's to do. Time passes and nightfall comes. The door opening wakes Yusuke, and he sees that it's Mitsuki. She snuggles him once again, apologizing for waking him up. She tells him to sleep some more, that she'll wake him up, but he claims he's already awake and will stand up in a bit. Mitsuki thanks him again for everything, but Yusuke says there's no need. Upon the crack of dawn, Takemura can overhear chatter, and he resolves that it's time to stand up. Just then, someone screams Mitsuki's name, and she calls him Akon, also known as Etsushi. He claims that he saw her name in the entry book and has been so worried. Now, he's just glad that she's okay. Both Takemura and Mitsuki sit up at the same time, causing Etsushi to frown. He then calls her aside for a chat. She looks to Takemura for permission, and he tells her to go. As they're walking out, Etsushi concludes that he must be her boyfriend and wonders how much of a pain it will be. He later comes back to thank him for taking care of Mitsuki. Takemura says he's welcome and asks where Mitsuki is at the moment. Etsushi declares that he'll be the one caring for her, so Takemura shouldn't worry about it. He just smirks as Etsushi reiterates his thanks and declares his intention to care for Mitsuki. He follows up by asking if Takemura has a problem with that. He says he doesn't and inquires if Etsushi is her boyfriend. He says he is. Takemura just stays calm, points at Takashi, and asks if Etsushi will have enough to feed them. He mocks Takemura that he doesn't get it. He could easily approach Makura to sort everything out, even as new arrivals are placed in the West Wing. Etsushi claims he can get Mitsuki and her brother to the central area with him since it's closer to the medical area and much better than the West Wing. Takemura is fine with it. Etsushi lashes out, asking why Masaru isn't with them, that he'd cared a great deal for the boy. It's high noon, and Takemura is hating on Etsushi as he digs a grave for Masaru. He could understand Mitsuki blaming him for it, but nothing gave Etsushi the right to. He shrugs it off, concluding that Takashi can be looked after by his relatives. He thinks to himself that he could have just left the grave to the other two men, but he's just being stubborn. Takemura places a single flower on Masaru's grave and quips that he ran out of luck. Quietly, he makes his way back. He remembers Kuro's and makes a mental note to let her out before the rescuers arrive. He can't bring himself to leave her like that, so he resolves to sneak out after dark depending on how many guards are around. His thoughts are disrupted by the sound of coughing in the distance. He takes a look and sees that it's Makura. She turns so red from all the choking and waves her hand around. After she calms down, she apologizes and offers Takemura a cigarette. He turns her down, saying he doesn't smoke anymore. Makura thinks it's a good idea and quips that it's bad for health. This leaves Takemura wondering why she's doing it. She claims she wanted a change of pace, and since everyone around her was doing it, she thought she could handle it, but it just tastes bad to her. Takemura concurs that it's not that fun, but Makura tells him that he needn't be polite since the world has pretty much ended. He inquires whether Makura is the boss. She just says that she's the co-leader and it's only in name. She only handles medical issues and counseling. Makura segues into talk of seeing Takemura digging a grave and asks if it was his little brother. He stutters as he explains that it was Takashi's younger brother, not his. She quips that Takashi didn't seem to be in immediate danger, but she's not as confident. She begs him to keep a close eye on the boy if possible. Takemura reveals that he's no longer with them, and then reiterates the reason why per Makura's request. She promises to take care of it for him and bids him goodbye. Takemura acknowledges that he's free and later on tells Mitsuki that Atsushi will be caring for them. He plans to head into town once night falls. True to his word, Takemura arrives at his apartment building late that night. He realizes it's been a while since he stopped by. He navigates the building with a torchlight, and the first thing on his list is to do something about the weapons he'd compiled. He thinks to smuggle them into the building but realizes how bad it'll be if he gets caught. He thinks to hide them somewhere near the hall but realizes he won't have access to them in a pinch. His last option is to keep them in the truck, maybe in a gun case. Takemura gets distracted when he sees a hand-cranked radio and wonders if there's anything else he can use. He settles on taking just his ID and keys. Takemura springs for a beer. It's warm but he loves the taste anyway. When he finishes it, he remembers that he had one more can left and wondered if he left it at Kuro's apartment. He and his torchlight make their way up the hall, only for him to see Kuro's on the floor. Takemura asks himself whether she got out of her restraints herself. He'd handcuffed her hands behind her and is pretty sure he tied her to the chair with a towel. He taps her face, calling her name as he checks if she's conscious. He reckons that she may be hibernating but also doubts it. With winter coming, he'd seen other zombies holing up but none of them had ever stopped moving the way Kuro's has. He touches up on her, squeezes her melons even and still doesn't get a response. He resolves to leave her door open since there's nothing else he can do with her. He hopes that she can find her way out once she's able to move again. Takemura gathers all the beer he can and sits by his window, downing one can after the other. He plans to sneak back into the hall since the helicopters will arrive the next day and he's only been gone a day. Before that, he'd like to scan the town. Takemura would like some sleep but he's still on high alert because of how hectic the last few days have been. He decides to let the alcohol chill him out as he recalls the last time he drank this much. It had been the second time he'd met Fujino. The girl had been terrified. He reminisces on all their experiences and declares that it's pathetic that they're right where they began. Takemura catches some shut-eye and at about 3 a.m. he hears footsteps approaching his bed. He opens his eyes and there Kuro's is, staring down at him. She dives on top of him and bites his neck. Takemura quickly kicks her off and grabs his neck, regretting how much he'd let his guard down. It dawns on him that she's still a zombie and he was dumb enough to drink and sleep off next to her. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that it's just saliva on his neck and Kuro's didn't bite him. She tries diving on top of him again but this time he stops her by the shoulder. She tries biting his hand so he removes it. She lands back flat on the bed. It's obvious to Takemura that she sees him as food but she's not trying to bite him. He feeds her his finger and Kuro's just licks it clean. Takemura then lies down, lamenting that he's just a talking skull to her and that she freaked him out. Kuro's presses her melons against him and begins to lick his arm and then his belly. She licks all the way down and tugs at his shorts until they come off. She continues licking, leaving Takemura to wonder if she's attracted to him because he hasn't had a wash in days. She swallows him whole and continues to do so until they finish. Afterwards, Takemura reckons that the more they made love, the more she responded to him, so he's been basically feeding her this whole time. The other zombies had gotten their smarts from eating humans, so Takemura reckons he could find their weaknesses using Kuro's. Unfortunately, she feels different from them with less intelligence and a more learned behavior. By the time he wakes up, it's already evening time. All his plans to scan the city automatically get thwarted. He'd been so stressed and thanks Kuro's for helping him feel better. Since the helicopters arrive tomorrow, Takemura needs to get back to the hall that night. He takes Kuro's outside and wraps her in a camouflage hoodie, saying she could now walk around without flashing everyone. He bids her goodbye but Kuro's keeps following him around. This pushes him to get on his bike and put some distance between them. He then yells for her to stay safe. Sayaka Makiura puts a scalpel to a lady's stomach, egging on the other surgeons helping her out. They tug at the lady's flesh until Makiura sees the amniotic layer and declares that all she needs to do is cut through the film and pull the baby out. She pants and pants as she goes at it, getting closer to her goal. She finally pulls out the baby and it bursts out crying. She proclaims that it's a very healthy baby but thinks to herself that it did well. At the Makiura Hospital of Gynecology, Sayaka goes in to see her father, and at the reception, she complains about being called Saya. They tell her that the director is in and she moves to knock on his door. Her father welcomes her back, asking if everything went well. She says it did, thus making her father really happy. Although he likes her following in his footsteps, he wouldn't recommend it. Sayaka says it's too late. She expresses her joy about picking her career, especially after the day she's had. Her father proclaims that it's worth doing and makes her promise to give it her all. Makiura is in her office when her phone rings. The man on the other side asks her to come to the university hospital, but she declines because she's on duty. He promises to call in for her and explains that they're swamped due to a riot. They're even calling in everyone they can. Makiura is surprised to hear about a riot in Japan, and he tells her to turn on the radio before hanging up. As she drives down, she hears of massive reports of riots in the metropolitan area and confirms that what her friend had told her was true. She's worried that there could be a lot of casualties but gets stuck in a traffic jam. Makiura notices the ruckus in the distance and declares that something isn't right. She comes down from her vehicle and approaches the hospital. She then screams for them to remove the ambulances from the entrance, but when she takes a look around, there's absolutely no one inside. No patients, no receptionists, nothing. Makiura picks up her phone and tries calling her friend, but all to no avail. She wanders a few ways into the hospital and holds her mouth shut as she sees human flesh mixed in with blood on the floor. She pushes open the nearest double doors only to see zombies eating people. She's utterly horrified, even more so when one of them turns to look at her. Makiura runs for her life with the zombie hot on her trail. As she flees, she keeps asking herself what they are and what is going on. She manages to reach the elevator in time and crouches to the ground in fear. It takes her to the third floor, but the door is open to reveal that there's also no one on it. Someone calls out to her from the hollowness and Makiura gets wide-eyed. She then peeks over the counter and sees a scared younger nurse. After asking her what's going on, the nurse stutters that she has no idea but that everyone is going crazy. Makiura quickly ducks, joining the girl as they try to evade an incoming zombie. The nurse is already sobbing heavily, holding her mouth so she wouldn't scream. Makiura does the same as the zombie draws closer. Right before her eyes, the zombie grabs the young nurse by the head and pulls her onto the counter, immediately digging into her flesh. All the proof Makiura had of this are the crunching sounds she overhears. She musters some courage and whips the zombie on the head with an IV holder. She hits it hard enough to squish its brain. Makiura is still trying to catch her breath, but the zombie's body is still wiggling on the floor. She screams from the horror, but just then, someone calls her attention to the present. Makiura snaps out of it, realizing that she had zoned out whilst in a meeting. She'd been asked what to do about the rescue helicopters being 2 days late. Apparently, there have been more survivors and not enough supplies to go around. Fights have even broken out because of this. She declares that had the helicopters come on time, they wouldn't have saved these extra people, and that things may have gone wrong, but they can't stop helping those who need it. A lady raises her hand and asks how long the supplies will last. The chairman answers, saying just a week. He then suggests that they send out foragers. Makiura asks what happens should that incident repeat itself. This causes an outrage as the different members yell out their grievances. One laments about 6 people dying after crossing the bridge, another about everyone dying if they don't get supplies. Someone just wants to know if the helicopters will come back within the week. Ultimately, Makiura declares that they'll hold out for as long as they can. She steps out all shaken up, thinking about how her father would have handled the situation much better and even saved more lives. She wonders how long she can keep it up and resolves to do what she can. She runs into Fujino by Takashi's bedside and bids her a good morning. Mitsuki looks quite haggard, but Makiura only thinks it. She asks Takashi if he feels any pain and he says no with a smile. This makes Makiura wonder why Mitsuki seems so down. She pulls her aside and asks if she had a good chat with her brother. Mitsuki says she did. Makiura had expected her to be happier about it. She then tells her that Takemura had told her to take care of them. Life comes back to Mitsuki as she inquires if Makiura has spoken with Takemura. Makiura reiterates that he entrusted her and Takashi to her. Mitsuki begs her to tell Takemura that she's sorry for everything whenever they see each other. She asks why Mitsuki wouldn't just do that herself, and the girl claims it's too late. That Takemura had risked his life to save them, but she was upset and confused, so she said horrible things to him. She'd even ignored her actions and acted like his lover. Mitsuki blames herself for causing so many problems and screams that she was the one that was supposed to do it. Makiura thinks she's talking about the grave and tells her that it's not her fault, that she had to watch over her brother. Mitsuki is surprised by the information and bursts into tears anew. She wanted to tell Takemura. She wanted to be the one to kill that stranger. Mitsuki visits Masaru's grave, lamenting that she pushed everything onto Takemura when she should have been the one to do it. She calls herself a bad sister but realizes that she has to protect Takashi even if she has to do it alone. Moments later, a helicopter lands onto the OOO town hall and the people clamor after it. The soldiers drop some supplies for them. This surprises Makiura because it means they're not here to get them. The soldier discusses with Chairman Mizubashi, and he, in turn, explains to the crowd that they'll need to prioritize the injured and sick. Since there isn't enough food and water, the copter can only make one round trip. People yell from the crowd, asking if the helicopter will come back, and the chairman affirms that it will, stating that they'll take 2 days tops because they need to source fuel for the helicopter. He then reiterates that they'll only be taking the sick and the injured. This draws Mitsuki's attention, and she's grateful that they'll take Takashi. She wonders if she can go with him, only for Makiura to tell her that Takashi may have appendicitis. Apparently, his injuries challenged his immune system and paved the way for infection. Makiura says that they could operate, but it could be life-threatening without ready antibiotics. Mitsuki just stands there staring, listening as she's told her brother will need to be transported to another facility so he can recover. Days later, and almost all of the sick and injured have been evacuated and most of the rooms lay empty. Mitsuki sits by herself as no news of further help comes and their food supply is running low. She feels scared and alone even when there are many more people than when she was at the mall. Back there, it was just the 4 of them. They had enough food and didn't have to watch their backs against zombies, but here, Mitsuki is surrounded by strangers and is always hungry. She'd counted on Takemura for everything. She beats up herself for being so inconsiderate towards him. Although she apologized, she still didn't think of anyone else and dumped everything on him. Tears roll down her cheeks as she remembered how Takemura had killed someone because of her. Makiura calls her aside and Mitsuki is seen yelling that Takemura did something for them and for Makiura not to blame him. She agrees, stating that he seems like a reliable person, especially from Mitsuki's stories. She concurs, telling Makiura how amazing Takemura is and how he always came with a plan whenever she thought they were lost. Had that stranger not invaded them, Mitsuki had thought they'd live together forever. Makiura reiterates that he'd left an impression on her too, the first time they met. He was watching her from behind the 2 siblings. On their second meeting, he was like a different person. At first glance he appeared dangerous to her, but he later changed her mind. She feels like he's dangerous but not the type to senselessly attack others. Makiura asks Mitsuki to help her with something and inquires if she could distribute the supplies in their car. Mitsuki is confused but Makiura quickly apologizes, explaining that they're short on supplies. Mitsuki says it's fine but the supplies are Takemura's. The doctor then informs her that she's already talked to him about it and he had told her to take half the supplies based on the circumstances. Mitsuki is curious about the circumstances and Makiura explains that Takemura asked for access to their material room and the rights to freely leave and return to the town hall. Mitsuki acknowledges that it sounds like him while Makiura proclaims that they needed to check in with her about the supplies first. Mitsuki thought Takemura had forgotten about her. She realizes that she's just been sitting while he's out there planning something. She then agrees to the supply deal but in exchange, she wants a job. Mitsuki watches as Onodera fetches water and asks for a chance to fetch some water too. Despite him telling her that he can do it, Mitsuki swipes the bucket from him, telling him to take a rest. The need for cleaners had increased ever since the sick and injured got evacuated. More room cleaners and people to fetch water became needed. Mitsuki had met with the leader and got drafted into water transport. One of the men on their team lashes out at Onodera, telling him not to let a girl do his work. He tries defending himself and Mitsuki backs him up, stating that he'd been working very hard and she'd made him take a break. The man doesn't listen and swipes the bucket from Mitsuki anyway. If it was before, she'd be grateful for the help, thinking it was natural, but at the mall, Takemura made her do a lot of work and she really liked being praised when she was done. She is determined to carve out a place for herself now. As they transport the water back to the hall, Mitsuki apologizes to Onodera for getting him in trouble. He brushes it off, saying he's used to it. Mitsuki wonders what he means, but before Onodera can explain, they overhear someone yelling to get their weapons back. He screams that the weapons are theirs and not for the man standing guard. They call the troublemaker Kyudo and tell him to calm down. The chairman apologizes on Kyudo's behalf, explaining that it's been very hard going in search of food unarmed. Kyudo cuts him off, asking if there's a problem giving them their tools back. The guard tries explaining, and Kyudo screams for him to go find food instead. The chairman has to hold him back before Kyudo listens to reason. He explains that they have to settle things because he plans on setting out. Everyone is surprised, but only Makira asks if he's really serious. He reiterates that he is and so would like their weaponry back. She says she knows things are bad and they should probably gather food while they still can, but Mizubashi declares that they can manage, and if they fail, it'll mean less mouths to feed. This statement breaks Makira's heart and she yells that they should join forces to find a way to survive instead. That they have food and help could come the next day. The chairman smiles and calls her a good person. He then tells her that waiting will not do them any good, nor will waiting for outside help. Takemura barges into the conversation and says he'll come with them since many hands make light work. He smirks, calling himself a newcomer too. Excitement fills Mitsuki's face as she sees Takemura. Chairman Mizubashi throws the question into the crowd, asking if anyone else would like to go with them. Everyone looks away and the chairman asks Makira if she doesn't mind. She bites back her words as she says she understands. He bursts into laughter, telling Takemura that he has guts. Takemura in turn gives a sarcastic laugh in agreement. He thinks to himself that he doesn't have the least bit of courage but is just depending on the fact that the zombies won't attack him. The others may be prepared to die on this operation, but it's like going on a stroll for him. Takemura can't even fathom what will happen should they run into the intelligent zombies. Mizubashi takes the reins as he introduces their lifelines after the personal introductions are done with. Takemura can't help but think their patrol wagons look like armored vans. Mizubashi explains that 2 people will take the truck while the remaining people will share themselves into the remaining 2 vans. They notice an intruder and yell for him to show himself. They're all surprised to see Onodera, who asks if he can come as well. Mizubashi appreciates the sentiment but asks him if he's sure. He even reminds him that they may have to fight some zombies. Onodera yells that he'll like to be of help. Mizubashi welcomes him and makes him introduce himself. They leave Sasaki to cover the front and Kyudo to handle Takemura and Onodera. To him, Onodera is just a rubberneck and he asks if the chairman is sure about him. He moves on to explain the basics to Takemura and Onodera, telling them to never open the doors for anything and prepare to defend against an attack from inside the van. He points towards the back, telling them that they should hand him a steak whenever he asks for one. Takemura refers to them as he proposes that they may not be enough to take down the zombies. Kyudo says they'll be enough as long as they stay in the car and promises that they'll see what he's talking about when they do it. Takemura thinks it's smart and Kyudo reiterates how foolish it would be to fight zombies empty-handed. As they head out with the van, Kyudo tells them not to do anything excessive and promises to kill whoever gets in his way. Mizubashi scolds him for this and Takemura asks him where they were before moving to the town hall. The chairman quips that they came from their corporate office, and when Takemura expresses surprise that their food supply lasted, he explains that it was a new office with emergency stores in the warehouse. They also wouldn't have lasted through the second half had they not gone outside. Takemura questions him on the type of office and Mizubashi says it's one for construction, and that he could build houses if given the tools and materials. Takemura reckons the talent wouldn't be so useful in their world right now. The teams don't arrive at their target distribution site until that evening. Sasaki, Kyudo, Takemura and 1 other member are to head and to scout the place first. 4 of them step in holding stakes with Sasaki at the forefront also wielding a torchlight. It gets to a point where Sasaki grabs a vase plant and tells the rest of the team that if they see just 1 zombie, they'll take it on, but if it's 2, they'll run back to the van. They all concur and Sasaki throws the vase in the distance. Just 1 zombie trudges out and they all attack it on Sasaki's command. They stab her heart, stomach and neck respectively. After looking around, they discover that the distribution center had 2 stories. The office area doesn't cover 10% of the space, and the rest just comprises an expansive warehouse for sorting spots, conveyors and the likes. The plan is to cover the entire first floor and rendezvous with the rest of the team who've parked the vans in a more defensive formation in case of any attacks. Mizubashi gives the go-ahead as zombies begin to troll out of the shadows. Takemura, Kodu and Onodera stab at the zombies through holes in the van. The zombie assault only lasted for about 20 minutes, but it felt like hours to Takemura. Mizubashi then declares the battle over for the meantime. Meanwhile, the remaining 3 are trying to catch their breath. Takemura lashes out, yelling that zombies are horrific and asking Kyudo whether they always do stuff like this. He reiterates that it's never this intense and the day's battle was a little crazy. Mizubashi apologizes and claims that for food, a little recklessness can be forgiven. Kyudo mocks his age and he tells him to shut up. Luckily, the noise they'd made had lured out all the zombies, so they didn't run into any in the other spots they searched. On this note, they move on to explore the second floor. Kyudo sees a forklift and wonders aloud if they should use it. He tries it out and confirms that the battery is working fine. Mizubashi then mandates him to lead the way as the only place left to search is deep within. Kyudo quips that the setting reminds him of something. Takemura is interested in what it is. Kyudo says it's like a scene from a movie called Alien, where the lead actress was riding a forklift. Takemura concurs and reminds him that she even fought the boss with a power loader. It takes Mizubashi screaming to pull them back to the seriousness of the situation. Kyudo later claims that zombies aren't coming. Mizubashi agrees only because he can't sense their presence, but Sasaki thinks it's because there were less of them on the second floor to begin with. They conclude that it's already late and agree to procure the food come daybreak. They went back to the first floor to lock the shutters and entrances and proceeded to the office to get some rest. They also created a lookout system where 2 people stay up while the others sleep. Kyudo and Takemura get paired up and they sit near the entrance. Kyudo asks him if he's not scared of zombies, but doesn't wait for an answer before saying how scared of them he is on the inside. He claims he kills them mercilessly because they eat people and that it's kill or be killed even if they look like humans. He finds it weird that Takemura is rather calm, lacking that anger or hostility towards zombies but killing them nonetheless. Kyudo finds that pretty scary and asks Takemura if he was fighting zombies before City Hall. Takemura reiterates his experience at the supermarket and how he bunkered down with some passersby but is alone now. He can easily tell that Kyudo is misunderstanding him, but he doesn't care. He changes the topic to Sasaki and how he seems like an expert. Kyudo then reveals that he was in the army and they both drool over Sasaki's level of preparedness. Kyudo inquires whether Takemura was in the military too, but gets disappointed to hear that he was just a salaryman. He apologizes to Takemura for saying weird things about him and Takemura brushes everything off. In his head, he keeps thinking about Sasaki being a reliable ally, but also a troublesome foe. He's at ease that the guys are more decent than he thought. He'd planned to use searching for food as a cover to kill them all if they weren't. The next day, Takemura learns to use the forklift, but Kyudo is annoyed because he can't use the lift correctly. Mizubashi asks Kyudo to help him load the supplies onto 2 vans, claiming that there are a lot of people to feed so they'll bring a whole lot of food. Takemura is glad that they're not planning to monopolize the food like he thought they would. Just then, one of Mizubashi's subordinates yells that he found seasonings and that he should come take a look. Unfortunately, he gets attacked by a zombie before Mizubashi can get there. He yells for them to call the lookouts, but it'll be too late before Sasaki and the others reach him. Mizubashi feels helpless without weapons. Just then, Takemura sights the ruckus and so does Onodera, who had brought a box straight to where the zombie is. He screams and Takemura yells, telling him not to freak out. He steps on the forklift while Mizubashi makes the others move the vans out of his way. As Onodera struggles with the zombie, Takemura prays that he'll make it in time.